Hey everybody, in today's video we are going to do a huge bulk processing of greens and ultimately into this green powder. I'm going to show you how much I start with, how much we get at the end, how I preserve it for long-term or short-term use, the way that will keep it as fresh as possible to maintain the most nutritional value as we can. Really quick before I get started, I just think that all these colors are so beautiful. I just finished one of the steps, which you'll see in the video right before we get this in the oven for a conditioning step, which is going to help with the help with the preserving. But I just wanted to show you because it's so beautiful that this is what's coming throughout this video. Why would you want to have a homemade greens powder? Well, I mean, I don't know about you, but we do not get enough greens in our diet on a regular basis. And by doing this, I'm able to get it into our diet more. And it's in a different form that allows us to integrate it into foods that we wouldn't otherwise eat it in. I mean, we even just sprinkle this on top of a soup or a stew or anything that you're eating. You can sprinkle it on like you would any kind of topping. And there really isn't a huge flavor transfer. There's not a texture change or anything like that. So it's sort of this thing that can boost almost anything, which I think is so versatile and so valuable. This is the time of year when greens are really at their peak. This is all kale that you saw there, but there's lots of different other greens, kinds of other greens that this time of year you can get in large quantities or maybe in bulk, maybe on a discount from a local farmer, which is what we did here. And that can kind of have its own advantages too. I anticipate this will last us quite some time. One more little look, and we'll show you at the very end how much this actually equates to in terms of jars. Okay, so there is actually a tiny amount of another green in here, and it is these radish greens. We got our final CSA box for the summer, and it had these beautiful daikon radishes in it with the greens still attached. So they are so long and there are so many that I just had to make sure I dehydrated them because honestly, they probably would have just been discarded otherwise. I did do the leaves and the stems separately. I bagged them separate so that I could keep them separate in the dehydrator, as I just didn't know how it would turn out, but I think it did just fine when everything was said and done. I ordered an additional 12 bunches of kale with this final CSA box. I wanted to get a good supply of greens on our shelves to get us started on a winter supply of this. We are trying to get as many leafy green vegetables in our diet as we can, and when we add them in this powder form, it really helps to accomplish this goal. This is why I ordered so many bunches, and because they are in season, and the farm we had our summer CSA through is a great local and organic option that has a huge harvest right now. I believe I got 5 bunches of the green kale and 6 of the purple kale. And now each type of kale has a slightly different nutritional profile, so I wanted to get a mix of the two. This also goes with any green. So I love doing collard greens too, as they offer a different set of nutrients. The more variety we can get in these mixes, the more packed they will be with amazing nutrients to support our health. I did start by removing the leaves on the kale and setting the stems aside. I didn't want to just throw the stems, so I chopped them separate and bagged them separate as well. When I got through all the green kale, it amounted to 2 1-gallon size bags, utterly squished and packed to the max. I can't believe I got all those greens in just 2 bags. As for the purple kale, remember I had more bunches, so I ended up filling 2-gallon size bags as well, using the same techniques as with the green. Then I didn't want to use another bag, so I filled the remaining kale in a 1-gallon glass jar that I have. I've been doing this process with greens and other vegetables for quite a while, so I do wash the bags and reuse them. It is super easy, very quick, and feels good to do because these bags are really only used for a short time to store something that isn't dirty or messy at all. After I got all the kale leaves and stems bagged up, I had to wait for the dehydrator to be free as I had the radish greens and stems in there. The next morning, I was able to start loading. I'm not going to show in today's video the dehydrating, loading, and unloading process, but I tell you, I pack a lot in there. I actually use every other tray in my dehydrator and pack it high because I've found that this is the most efficient way to dehydrate these types of greens. And so I have 6 trays that fit in my machine, so I only end up using 3. After I pack the tray, I gently try to feel the greens across the tray to make sure there's no dense pockets. And if there are, I just fluff it up and spread it out so it's all nice and even. I'm able to get about half of one of these gallon bags in the dehydrator at one time. So about 2 bunches of kale, which is quite a bit. And then at 125 degrees Fahrenheit, a batch of greens takes between 6 and 8 hours to be completely dry and dry enough to be powdered. As I took the kale out of the dehydrator, I would load it into these gallon jars. They have an airtight seal, so I knew it would stay fresh until I was ready to powder all the greens in one big session. I really packed the kale dried in these jars too, so that I didn't have to use as many. To powder, I loaded a few handfuls into my high-speed blender and put it on high. If I put too much in, it was trickier to get it to the point where it bounces around in the air, which is what I wanted to ensure a nice, fine, and even powdered result. I tried to run the machine also as quick as possible, but long enough to get the job done. Doing container load after container load, I didn't want the machine to build up too much heat. So as the powder came out of the mixer, I then put it onto one of my large baking sheets. Once all the greens and stems were powdered, I put the powder on the baking sheet in the oven at 170 degrees, which is as cool as my oven gets while still being on. And I let the tray be in there for 1 hour. Once it was past the hour and then also cooled down, I broke up any pieces that had clumped together using a spoon and then ultimately ended up using a sifter because it was much faster. I filled the jars that I wanted to store the greens in, and I left a couple inches of room at the top just to make sure that the sealing step would be able to be the most effective. I ended up filling 1 quart jar and 1 pint jar this way, and I still had a little over 3/4 cup left over. In total, 11 bunches of kale ended up being 6 cups of powdered greens, which seems to be that each bunch produced around a 1/2 cup of greens powder, especially if you include the radish leaves and stems we put in there too. This can give you an idea of how much kale you'd be eating relative to the volume of the powder. Each 1/4 cup, which is 4 tablespoons, would be approximately 1/2 a bunch of kale. I should have the kale in cups too instead of bunches, but I didn't have it. And also keep in mind that every bunch of kale will be slightly different sized, and the variety also makes a difference with how much kale volume you're going to be dealing with in one bunch. One super fun way I wanted to mention that we like to eat these greens as kind of like a snack is to put it on popcorn. Our kids love this. We melt butter, add salt, and then just sprinkle the green powder on top. It's super fun and we all enjoy it. Of course, we love to add it to smoothies, and like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, anything that you can top, or just even things that you wouldn't think to top, like tacos maybe, or in a lasagna, or when you're making lasagna, you could just layer some of the powder in there and it can be kind of like a greens layer like you would spinach. All fantastic ways, like endless possibilities, both while cooking as well as when you're done cooking. My new vacuum sealer has been so fun to use, and I've used it a ton. I wanted to use the vacuum sealer with this huge batch of greens because I want them to stay optimally fresh until I am ready to start using them in a smaller quantity. So even though the quart jar has a very large volume, when I open that jar up to start using, I will actually split it into a few smaller jars, vacuum seal the ones that I'm not going to use now, and then keep one jar that I won't vacuum seal that I'll just keep going into. I hope this video helps you, and maybe you'll want to get some powdered greens stored in your kitchen for added nutrition. We've got more dehydrating videos and other kitchen projects coming up soon. So I hope you have a wonderful day, and we will see you soon.